purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power. No scholar can map them. No hunter can trap them. No person can deny.
Hello and welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm Catherine Fahringer, the producer of this show and your host for this program. I have with me today my dear friend Louita Wilson, who's been on twice before, but we never run out of things to say. And we were kicking around some ideas the other day, and we thought we'd tackle the best and the worst of 1991. I couldn't think of any good things, so I'm hoping Louita can help me out. I thought of one, but mostly it was the worst. But welcome, Louita, and kick in here and tell me what you think.
Oh, I think it was one of the great things that happened in '91 was that Ann Richards took office.
Yes, that a local grand thing that happened to us personally here in Texas. That was a wonderful thing, and I worked darn hard for it too, and as you did.
Yes,
we
a
all
lot
did.
of us did.
Yes, right. So that was very rewarding.
And then, of course, it was very thrilling to see Dick Thornburg defeated.
Oh, yes. Now, that's the only good thing I had down here, I think.
You mean I stole your thunder?
Yes, you did. You took my one good thing that I had, yes. Dick Thornburg got whomped by Wofford. So that was all I'd come up with, but lots of bad things. But what are some more?
Well, do you think the collapse of the Russian Empire that started this year has seen that collapse? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it doesn't. It looks bad for their health, doesn't it? They're starving to death and everything is falling apart. I don't know what's going to happen there. Of course, it is a good thing we don't have this trumped-up Cold War that we had.
The monoliths.
So long.
Yeah.
So
well, I do feel terribly sorry for the Russian people, though, because they are going to have a terrible winter.
I know. We can't help them because we don't have any money.
Well,
it's funny what we have money for, isn't it?
Yes.
How come we have money for wars?
Well, did you see that on TV just a day or two ago? That I think it was $165 million worth of food that we have, or say we're having route over there, but it can't be delivered for 6 weeks yet. And remember, this is December, so the middle of January is Russia's frozen in by then.
I was going to say, well,
it can't be delivered for 6 weeks because of transportation problem, or they don't have anyone to sign for it.
Maybe the Catholic Relief Fund is in charge of it, and they're always short weighing and pocketing money and stuff. I'm just getting that in because they were again found to be pilfering and playing.
Well, overall, though, I think that's a good thing for '91. I think I'd put that down on the good column. I think I'd put it down in the good column. I'm worried about it, but it's a good thing. It's definitely better than what it used to be, so that's good. But I wish. The thing is, I'd like for good to be all good and not have these terrible crises.
Yeah, things that backlash again. Well, I put down for bad the Persian Gulf War was the top of my list, and the gag rule for the clinics that were receiving federal funds for poor women to have abortions. That I thought was extremely terrible.
Well, that gags doctors, too, as well as the women.
I know, that's interfering. How a bunch of legislators can get up there and take over the medical profession the way they do, it's just appalling to think that Joe Biden is supposed to know more about my body, or Alan Simpson, for heaven's sakes, than my doctor. I mean, this is crazy.
Let me tell you about Alan Simpson, can I?
Yes, please. Please, if I can stand it.
Well, if we stood watching him during that hearing, I think we can stand this. But I lived in Wyoming for a number of years, and I learned there that they were extremely proud of the fact that they were the first state in the Union to give women the vote. I think it was in 1869 or 79. I remember I went into a clubhouse in Casper, Wyoming, frequently, where this was all in a proclamation that you saw just the minute you went into the hall. So anyway, when Wyoming then applied for statehood, the delegates went to Washington, and the Congress told them, no, you can't come in if you let women vote. That's just not Christian-like, and that's just against everything, and you can't have your women voting. And so these gallant men said, we come in with our women, or we don't come in. So Congress gave in, as usual. They're such wimps up there that they give in on anything. So they gave in. So Wyoming has had this, and they call themselves the equality state. And they've had this proud tradition now for over 100 years of being very fair-minded about their women. And then they elect a senator like Alan Simpson, who absolutely trampled their tradition. I just think he was disgusting.
Well, how on earth did that happen, do you suppose? Was he always such an awful man?
I didn't know him up there. I don't know.
He's always been bad. He's so mean. Molly Yard said that every time that she's gone with a group of women to testify on behalf of women's rights, they delay them, they stall them. They always tell them they're going to be on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it gets to be like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they finally let them come in, and then they say, "Oh, you ladies are looking so rested and refreshed." I mean, if that isn't just mean, they're smarmy, condescending. I hate that man. I hope the Wyoming people hate him now too. Surely they've got.
Well,
they have sense. Once they can get it back.
All my Christmas cards that go up there this year say, "Eliminate Allen."
Yeah. You know, I have a real problem. They're always saying that if you're not pleased with the way things are going in Washington, then you look yourself in the mirror and say, "I did it because I voted wrong." Well, I didn't vote wrong. In the first place, I don't live in Wyoming, so I couldn't vote for Alan Simpson. But they give me two choices for president, and what if I don't like either one of them? I have to vote the party, of course, but it doesn't mean that my party never wins, of course, and you'll never guess what I am. How can it be? I worked real hard to get Phil Gramm out of there. I just think he's a menace. And I tried. I wasn't enormously pleased with the man who was going to challenge him, but it was certainly, I felt once in, that perhaps he could be maneuvered in a way, or apprised of certain things, and that he would probably be more amenable to listening and to a rational approach than that idiot Graham. He is just appalling. So why is it my fault? I didn't do it.
No, we didn't.
So I'm not going to take the blame for all the time. Somebody is doing something shady somewhere and getting all these idiots to run, and then you've got a choice of bad and worse.
Well, you know, I wish somebody that had tremendous staff and computers and everything would do a study of the actions of Congress since the time they were established for these 200 years or so. Because it is Congress. If you want to see how greedy, how mean, how insensitive, how careless a group of men can be, study the actions of Congress. Here they were given this marvelous continent, one of the richest continents in the world. You know, and the Indians had taken very good care of it. They hadn't abused it. They hadn't overused it and all that. And we took it away from them. And then we had this wonderful form of government, democratic form of government, and we sent these great men to Congress to make laws for us. And look what they have done to this country in 200 years.
Yeah, trashed it.
Trashed it. Absolutely trashed it. And it's not the president per se that is responsible for a lot of the boondoggles and a lot of the bills and the money that's wasted. Congress controls.
But it's so embarrassing because it's a Democratic Congress now. So,
well, I don't care whether it's Democrat or Republican. I just think that congressmen are. I think it's a shameful show that they have put on for 2 centuries now.
I do too. Getting worse all the time. There's no good guys anymore, and some of the good guys that I thought were good guys turned out to be bad guys. So.
Well, there are a few good guys that are trying, but they don't usually get the money. They can't get the money to back them to make the big races.
Who was that adorable boy? Adorable boy. That nice man who nobody thought he'd win. Oh gosh, I can't even remember. I wish my friend Peggy were here. She knows everything about everything. Anyway, he was a long shot, and he was not going to get it. And he got in, and he started making waves immediately.
What office did he get in?
He's a senator from, and I cannot for the life of me think of his name, but he made quite a stir, and the press even paid attention to him because he was up there making statements. He was the one that opposed the Persian Gulf thing, and it'll come to me maybe before it's over. But anyway, that was something nice that happened, but I don't know when it happened, so does it get included? I think another bad thing, going back to bad things, is George Bush, who is the baddest thing as far as I'm concerned that ever happened. He is setting a perfectly terrible example in this country for the separation of church and state. He has done nothing but lock the two together. And this was just an awful thing he did. This was for National Days of Thanksgiving, for April 5th to 7th, 1991. It's a proclamation, and it starts out, as the psalmist wrote, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is gracious, for his mercy endures forever. Almighty God has answered the prayers of millions of people with the liberation of Kuwait and the end of offensive operations in the Persian Gulf region." Now it goes on and on and on and on, and it mentions God a number of times and Jesus, and it is a religious document. He has no business doing this. He is dividing the country. He is saying that unless you have a belief, you accept his God, then you're just worthless. You're nothing. And of course, things like this are picked up by local governments, and you've seen what our mayor is doing. He is absolutely impossible. He got up there with that Louis Palau from South America, the evangelist that came here, and he said, Mayor Wolf said, "I'm so grateful to Louis Palau for coming here to help us save our city." He said, "We need to introduce our children to Jesus Christ to cut down on this crime and all." Now, please, nobody's ever heard of church-state separation down here, and apparently our president hasn't either. So,
well, this thing of celebrating the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Bill of the Rights in a church.
Oh, yes, San Fernando Cathedral, what an appropriate place. Well, I think the First Amendment belongs to them because they certainly ignored. Here was another little goodie. I don't take Time. I was thinking of changing from Newsweek to Time, but I see that I would not be bettering myself at all. This is a disgusting little one-sided, slanted article by two people who apparently don't know anything about the separation of church and state and tried to write about it without researching it. It's just one thing after another, it seems to me. Well, go ahead. It's your turn. I've spouted off long enough about baddies.
That article appalled me, just offended me, because they are trying to say that they're saying that the Constitution is trying to do two things at one time with the First Amendment. That it says there are two main camps, and on one side the separationists who argue that the church and state must remain clearly apart and that government should not be in the business of endorsing one faith or another. Now that's a traditional view.
Of course.
And then the others are the accommodationists who believe that the wall of separation between the church and state has grown too thick and cost too much. By isolating God from public life, they argue, the courts have replaced freedom of religion with freedom from religion. And here's the thing. A nation's identity is informed by morality, and morality by faith. How can people freely debate issues like nuclear arms or the death penalty? How can children be educated without any reference to spiritual heritage? And one of our Chief Justices observed, Scalia, political activism by the religiously motivated is part of our heritage.
Well, it was a really distressing and depressing article. As I say, they quoted every cliche that has ever passed the lips of the far right. And they've got, since they've repeated and repeated so many times, they have, now everybody is believing what they have said. If your lie repeated often enough will be believed. So that is what is happening to us as regards the wall of separation that Jefferson so carefully delineated to the Danbury Baptists. So that's another baddie. Now what do you have? You have any goodies on your list? Or
for 1991?
Yeah, unless you want to go back to 1881, which I think I introduced us as, I don't even know what was going on in 1881. Me either. Almost, but not quite.
Well, what else good happened this year that was...
Now, if you think of it, let me know. But I have a feeling that we'll have a lot of dead air.
Well,
here
we got the catfish farm throttled down.
Bring that up, yes, the catfish farm. But that was...
And our water level rose immediately then.
Yes, as soon as that was done away with. But I understand there was a little bit of finagling there, the city and the catfish farm owner. I'm not sure what it was. I didn't follow that as closely as I should have because I'm so busy grieving over church-state separation. I don't have time. I'll die of thirst while I'm grieving over church-state separation. Well, what I thought overall, going back to the Clarence Thomas hearings, that is a tragedy, of course, to have him on the Supreme Court. But I thought the general demeanor of most of the congressmen was less than could be desired.
Yes, you know, our Supreme Court Justice Thomas said that my mother says that when they took God out of the schools went to hell, and she may be right.
I know, isn't that nice? We got a brain like that on the Supreme Court. Wonderful. And Mommy said, she said if Anita Hill were, Clarence's mother said that if Anita Hill were her daughter, she'd give her a good whomping for talking the way she did. We got right? Really intelligent, wonderful, gracious, and anyway, Thomas wasn't raised by his mother, so how come all of a sudden she's out there preening herself before the cameras? Doesn't she just love it that her son is on the Supreme Court? And she never had anything to do with him. He was raised by his grandmother, who taught him bad things, too.
Well, you know, I mentioned to, after he was appointed, I mentioned to a very liberal-minded Jewish friend of mine something about, I said, well, you know, there goes a lot of our rights, because now they've got the majority, a very conservative court.
Oh, yeah.
And she says, oh, I said, you don't have to worry. And I said, well, why? She says, well, I said, when a court gets that lopsided and that out of touch with the mainstream, as those justices are, says no one pays any attention to them. Says they're just going to be off over there by themselves talking to each other. And I thought, could that be? Do you believe that can happen?
Well, I don't know. They don't pay any attention to them anyway, even when they rule about something on a church-state issue, like the prayer thing before football games. Why, it's been, 3-4 years ago. All right? Do we observe that ruling? No.
Well, I'm not in favor of the prayer necessarily, but that encourages me. Maybe we will just disregard everything the Supreme Court rules.
I never noticed we paid much attention to them anyway, so what the heck?
Yeah, well, maybe they're just going to be over there talking to each other. And
well, we'll certainly find out, won't we? But I must say that in the hinterlands, there's very little attention paid to any kind of ruling as regards prayer or in the school. And the Gideons are happily dispensing Bibles all over the public schools.
Well, the Bible is one of the most bloodthirsty, cruel books ever written.
I know. And fancy wanting to give it to children.
Oh, it's really a hideous, very horrible book to hand to children. You know, all the murders and the slayings and treachery and all of that that's in it. It's very...
I know, but the unfortunate thing is you'll find that most people don't know about those parts of the Bible because those parts of the Bible are not read from the pulpit. And I believe it was Robert Ingersoll who offered $1,000 to any minister who would read certain passages from the Bible that he selected, and he didn't have any takers.
You mean read in front of the pulpit?
Yes, to read to the congregation. And he didn't have anybody take him up on it because it does say some pretty horrendous things, and people will still look at you in amazement, those who have not read it, when you say, I quote a few things from it, happy is he who dashes his little ones against the stones. And they look at me as if I've lost my mind, but I haven't. It's in there. All they have to do is look it up. But I thought it was interesting that back in the 1800s, when Robert Ingersoll made that offer of $1,000 to any preacher who'd get up there and read these certain passages that he wanted to get out to the public, and they wouldn't touch it. Mm-hmm. So we know there are things in there that aren't good.
Well, that reminds me of a story that I was told by an anthropologist who had worked with the Pima Indians out in Arizona way back in the 1930s, a little bit before my time. Anyway, she said that they had missionaries that were there, of course, trying to introduce Christianity on the reservation. And so one old man went to one of the Protestant denominations, had a little church there, and he went to it. So he listened to the preacher, and he understood enough English to get the message. And afterwards, this anthropologist asked, said, well, what did you think of that? He says, oh, I don't like it. She said, well, why? What is it that you don't like about Christianity? And he said, says they worship a God that killed his son, and says, I will not kill my son, and I won't worship any God that does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's...
I mean, it is a very cruel, primitive religion.
When you really think about it, it is a primitive religion, Christianity is. They have the Holy Communion, or Eucharist, I think some people call it. It is in the Catholic, I understand, I've been told that in the Catholic Church, they believe that at the time they take this wafer, it becomes the body of Christ. I mean, it isn't just representing the body. Well, I always thought when people ate people, that was cannibalism. And I've said it, and people act shocked. But if you stop and think about it, that is exactly what it is. And it comes from the pagan. They did some pretty awful things, too. I'm not saying pagans were just the greatest, but that Christianity just appropriated a lot of things. And how it got to be respectable, I've never really understood.
Well, 12 million people were murdered in Europe to make it respectable.
Yeah, well, I guess that's one way of getting respectability out, isn't it? And brains out. And
yeah. Well, yeah, the massacre of the native European people, as Christianity spread north out of Italy and Rome and that area, has really never been recorded or made anything up. But the Christians murdered them by the thousands.
Well, I'm sure they did, and actually, if you're dead, you can't tell about it. And the other people, I suppose, are not going to brag about it. But have you ever noticed, too, I was just thinking about some of the hymns that are perfectly respected. People just think they're wonderful, and they go like, some of the words go like this: stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. And the other one is onward Christian soldiers, marching as to war. These are very warlike songs, and people, they were trying to get rid of that onward Christian soldiers. Remember, and the congregation said, no, we're not going to have that taken away from us. We love that song. It's a war. It's so no wonder the president marries Christianity and the state. I mean, it's done all the time. You do it under God, and it's an okay thing to do, to go kill people. That's crazy, isn't it? Well,
the thing that interests me is the real shrewd, canny thinking that went into the establishment of Christianity. Incidentally, there's a man named Gilbert Murray, who was a classicist, a scholar in England, way back, turned a little bit early teens in the 1900s, did a wonderful book on the origins of Christianity, the 5 stages to Christianity, where this group from Israel or Mideast wanted to take over, and they established their religion. But in order to make it palatable to the people that were accustomed to the great goddess worship, they had to have the dying and the resurrected God, and they had to have, this and this and this and this. So they incorporated a good deal of this into this Christian belief to make it palatable, to make the people believe in it. But then the thing that they were so shrewd about was that they induced this idea of original sin, which would make everybody born guilty. And the only way you can get rid of that guilt is by becoming a Christian and praying. And then they told you you're going to hell if you didn't, you see. So they had a foolproof system. They took the little kids and induced this terrible sense of guilt, original sin, and then only the church can get them out of it.
Well, I think that's a terrible thing to do to a child, and I think it's a terrible thing that we respect a system that works that way. And how...
Well, but George Bush evidently is still trapped in the guilt.
Oh, yeah, my goodness, yes.
Because he still feels like he must honor that. He'll go to hell.
Mother did a number on him. So anyhow, it takes with some people, not with others. I mean, I certainly was introduced to church and all that good, bad stuff. All the stuff that was considered the proper thing to do, with nice people raising their children in a proper way. And somehow it just didn't quite do it. I had, surely, but I can see if people are caught up in it, and that guilt thing is awful. But getting back to that, you were saying you're born guilty. You're born in sin. Okay. Well, how come these right to lifers are all the time talking about saving the innocent babies? Because they're only innocent when they're in the womb. So there's not really any point in saving them, because as soon as they're born, they're filled with sin and all that bad stuff.
That's a neat point. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, well, I just thought of it right now. That's really strange attitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
So unborn, they're innocent, but as soon as they're born, they're guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's some system, and it sure makes some people apparently happy or in control, I guess.
Well, yes, it has given power and control to a lot of people through these commercial ventures. And can you imagine how a preacher must feel that gets up, knows that he's going to get up there and everybody's going to be watching him and that he's going to be the center of attention of 100 or 1,000
It's a wonderful feeling. I preached a sermon, would you believe, at the Unitarian Church, the first Unitarian. Well, of course, my sermon was on Ingersoll, Robert Greene Ingersoll, the great agnostic. But that was a thrilling thing. I never enjoyed anything so much in my life as standing up there. I could see how I'd go to their heads.
That you'd get hooked on it.
Well, a whole room full of people was paying attention to me. That was pretty exciting. And so then I liked that so well that the other church invited me, and I went there, and I felt real good about that, too. So, but of course, there again, my subject matter was so wonderful. It wrote itself because I did a lot of readings from Ingersoll, who said so many.
Well, is Ingersoll available? Is there any kind of a compact volume of him?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's a new biography out. I have not really liked that, so I ordered another one. It's an older one that was written in 1950-something, called Royal Bob. But the best book of all is The Best of Ingersoll, is what it's called.
Well,
and it's got it's divided up so that you can pick quotes from any subject, whatever it is, women and children or religion or whatever. It's I've worn out 2 copies of it because I've used it so much.
Well, and then all this is being released about Mark Twain's writings are just phenomenal. Oh, he's as scathing as Ingersoll.
I know, and the funny thing is people don't realize it. They think of him, and then there again, I don't think he's as read as everybody knows about him, but I don't think there have been too many people who read anything other than Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. So they don't really know his biting wit and his detestation of organized religion, particularly, for heaven's sakes, Christian Science, which, unfortunately, his daughter, his one remaining daughter, he had 3 and 2 died, but she was a Christian Scientist.
Well, are any of these Mark Twain things available?
Yes, in fact, not too long ago, they had the complete works of Mark Twain at the bookstop.
Oh, they did?
They did.
How many volumes?
Well, actually, it was all in one. I don't know how they could get it all in one. It was a great, big, thick, fat thing, so I guess it can be done. It said complete, but I didn't really...
But did that have these papers in it that were not to be released
Now, that I don't know. See, I have a
2006?
feeling it would be some of the older stuff. They called it complete, and
Well,
it was a
yeah.
redone thing.
Because, you know, he forbade some of it being published until 2006.
Oh, I know it, because they were really...
100 years from his...
I'm so glad I got in on it, though. They came out in the early 60s. And I got was Letters to the Earth, and the Adam and Eve Diaries. Oh, those are funny. Those are funny.
The Adam and Eve Diaries?
Yes.
I haven't read them.
Yeah, that. You'll like that. It's all about how Adam names the animals, and it's most amusing. Well, Louita, we sort of strayed, I guess, from the best and the worst, but I think if you've got one shot left, let her rip.
Well, let me see if I can't pick out something real juicy in here.
Well, it better be quick.
Well,
We've got a wrap. I'm sorry you lost your chance.
Oh.
Your time's up for a Freethought Forum. Goodbye for now. Sorry, Louita.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure. My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure. My thoughts will not cater to duke or dictator. No person can deny